Hello everybody and welcome back to another card game tutorial video. In this video we're going to be adding a few more trainer cards to our game. So by the end of this video, your game should have the code for each one of the trainer cards you see in my hand. Now of these trainer cards, the most toughest ones will be Computer Search and Pokemon Trader. So let me show you what that looks like before we jump into this. So Computer Search should allow me to discard two of the other cards from my hand and choose any card from my deck. So I'm going to put two cards to my discard pile and then select a card from my deck. And then for Pokemon Trader, I can trade one Pokemon card in my hand for another Pokemon card in my deck. So I'm going to trade this card for a Blastoise. And then I will use Pokemon Breeder to evolve my Squirtle directly into a Blastoise. Now, if you enjoy this series and you want to see more, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you also want to support this, be sure to check out my Patreon linked in the description below. So before we jump into that, I want to show an example of not thoroughly testing your game. In the last video, we created this deck creator in our game. Now, if you double click within this deck here, you can add a card into the deck you're creating. But if you select outside of the deck area, it crashes the game. So whenever you create a game, be sure to try to test your game thoroughly so that somebody else doesn't find mistakes in your game. So let's fix this before we continue. Now the issue lies in our type pile object. In the step event, down here in our checked button released conditions for our double click, we have this variable called card selected. Now what we want to do is we want to create a condition that will negate this code here highlighted if card selected is less than 0. So whenever we are outside of the deck that is printed and we select, that number for card selected becomes -1 and below. So that's why we want this here. So now when creating this deck, if you select outwards, it will no longer crash the game. One more thing I want to do is in our object card left released event, I want to take this else if statement out of the for loop we have here. We only used that for loop when we didn't have the field position script created. So now that we have that created, we no longer need to have these two conditions or this condition. So now let's orient this correctly. I'm going to create an else here, and I'm going to change the conditions in this if statement to include this right here, to include this script call. Field position is not equal to -1, which means we are hovering over a field slot. And then I'm going to create that field position variable using this script call. And then I want to change all of the I designators to be field position. And then the only other I we will need to change is this one. And now we have successfully gotten rid of that for loop. So we've changed nothing in the game, we've just maintained the same logic throughout this left released event. Now, getting into today's video, we want to create some new variables. And those variables are going to be in our player object in the create event, all the way at the bottom. So these are all of the variables we will need for this video. I will explain each of them throughout the video. Now, one thing I also want to do in here is force our hand to start with all of the cards we want to test. So under our shuffle deck script, I'm going to have these lines. And this is forcing all of the cards that we're going to draw in our hand to be the trainer cards we will be testing, and including a stage 0 card so that it doesn't mulligan those cards back into our deck. And one last thing before we jump into here is we have our cards printing out all of the damage counters a Pokemon has. But in the game, you don't get damage counters until you're attacked. So what we're going to do is we're going to change D counters to health points. And then anytime a Pokemon is attacked, it will gain damage counters. And then as soon as those health points, or the damage counters, equal the health points, then that card is destroyed. So fixing that, if we go down to our field card object in the step event, we're going to add two conditions here. The first one is if damage counters is less than 0, we're going to force it to be 0 because we don't want any of our Pokemon to have a negative amount of damage counters. And then if the health points equals the amount of damage counters, we're going to eventually destroy that card and allow the opponent to take a prize card. And now that we're in the field card event, we're going to create a few more variables we will need for this video. The first one is we're going to initialize damage counters here, since we took it out in the creation of these cards, and then remove energy. Again, this will be explained when we use it. And one thing that keeps coming back to my code is this condition right here. I believe I've removed this a few times now, but let's do it again. So if we left that in there, it would change the cards in the field card object pile to equal Charizard. We had that back in an older video, so let's finally remove it. So let's make sure our game is working properly before we start coding these new trainer cards. So we're starting with all of the trainer cards we want to test. If I set Squirtle down, you'll see it no longer prints the damage counters above the card as it does on the other side of the field. And everything seems to be working as it should. So let's continue. So the first place we want to go is our card object and the left released event. And we want to go to our trainer condition, and we want to remove this here and add it to the alarm 2 code. This is because when we use a trainer card, this will remove the card from our hand too early and it will deorganize our hand. So since we've moved this here, when we used Bill, we had the temp value equal to hand count plus 1. So we're going to actually want to change that to plus 2. So that we can draw 2 cards, because now we have to wait until the alarm ends for this card to be removed from the hand. So therefore we're going to have to update this. So we're going to add half of the trainer cards we are creating to the trainer script we've created in a previous video. And then the rest we're going to add into a new script called SCR_assist trainer. This is for trainer cards that have a little more complex code to them. So the first trainer card we're going to code is going to be in our assist trainer script. And this is going to be Clefairy doll. So what I'm doing here is I'm copying over all of the code we used when setting a card down in our object card left released event. The code we are copying over is this code right here. I'm just pasting it in this script. So what Clefairy doll does is it acts as a basic Pokemon with only 10 health points. So all we need to do for this is set it on the field, just like we would any other card. So all of this will be just copy and paste from something we've done previously. So now, before we test this, we need to go back to our object card left released and create a condition for our assist cards. So in our object card left released event, we're going to add the following code. And as you can see, it mimics the trainer condition, except that the conditions are a little different. The differences are that we're going to create a new script that checks if it's an assist trainer card, and if the card's position is over a field position, then it will compute the assist trainer code. So let's create this script here. So what this code is doing is it's taking in a card number at argument 0, and it's comparing it to all of the assist trainer cards we program in this script. So that will be Clefairy doll, Defender, plus Power, Super Potion, and Potion. And if it is an assist trainer card, it will return 1, making this statement true. So now that we have that, we can test Clefairy doll. So if we draw a few cards, we'll find Clefairy doll, and if I set Clefairy doll onto the field, it adds it as if it's a regular basic Pokemon. And as you can see, it printed out the other side of the field. It prints 1 damage counter because it only has 10 HP. The next trainer cards we're going to program are going to be Defender and plus Power. Now, these cards assist the Pokemon by giving it more attack, and it reduces the amount of damage it takes this turn, or the turn it's played. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add it to the pile of the card, as you can see with this line here, and that's it. Whenever we start coding attacks, then we will scan the card pile for either of these two cards, and then when it comes to damage calculations, it will then consider them. So all we're doing here is just adding the card to the pile. So let's test that. So if we set Squirtle down, and then add Defender to it, we can see that it's added to the card's pile. And then same with plus Power. Now the thing about these cards is when the turn changes, these cards have to be removed the next turn. So later on in another video we will worry about that, but for now all we're doing is adding it to the field card objects pile. The next trainer card we are going to work on is Potion. Now, what this card is going to do is if you drop it on a card, on a field card, it will reduce the number of damage counters it has by 2. And then it will send the card to the graveyard. Now, we won't be able to see what the card can do since we don't have damage counters printed on the cards yet. But we can see that once the card is used, it then goes to the discard pile. Like that. So now we're going to move on to more complex trainer cards. And the next one is going to be Super Potion. Now, what makes this one different from Potion is that you have to remove one of the cards from the field cards pile in order to use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to set field select to equal the card number of Super Potion. And then we're going to set the field card that it's being played on. It has a new variable called remove energy. We're going to set that equal to 1 because we want to remove 1 energy. Field select we've initialized in our player object down here at the bottom. Now what we want to do is we want to be able to see that card we're using. We want to be able to see it displayed on the field, because if a player uses this card, they have to know that the game is waiting on them to do something. So we're going to add these 4 lines of code that will print out the card being used in the center of the field so that the player can see that the game is waiting on something. And as soon as that field select variable goes back to 0, it will no longer print that. Now, another thing to note is this card can only be used if the card it's being played on has an energy card attached to it. So we want to create this script energy count. So what this script is going to do, it's going to take in a field card object, an argument 0, and it's going to count all of the cards in its piles and check if they are energy cards. And if they are, they're going to increment this temp variable and return that temp variable. So in this condition, it wants to make sure that there's at least 1 energy card attached to that field card. And then if you notice, in both the Potion and Super Potion conditions, we have this comment saying script update damage counters, because here we're going to have to create a message, just like we did a few videos back, to update the opponent's side of the field. So ignore this from now. Let's ignore this new variable and test out to see if we can use the card given these conditions, and if we can see the card displayed in the center of the field. So in order to use Super Potion, a energy card has to be placed on the field card. So I should not be able to use Super Potion. As you can see, I cannot. And then if I put non-energy cards in the pile, no matter what, it should still not let me use the card. So let's now try doing it when the card has an energy card attached to it. So now I'm going to use it, and as you can see, Super Potion is being displayed in the center of the field, because I need to then select an energy card on here before progressing in the game. So let's continue. So I'm going to uncomment this out, and remove energy was created in the field card object. Now in the draw event of the field card, whenever the new variable, which is remove energy, is being called, I want to be able to view the pile. So this is the condition that will draw the pile, and I'm going to create an OR statement and say that if remove energy is greater than 0, print out the pile. Now, another thing I want to do in here, and this is foresight because I've already programmed all of this, is I want to change the pile script that allows me to select a card from the pile. I want to change temp to equal I-1. And then going back here, I'm going to change the temp value here to remove the -1, and then here I'm going to put +1 and +1 here. And this is because of what we're going to add next. In the step event, we're going to create a new condition to remove the energy card. And that will look like this. So if remove energy is greater than 0, and I'm choosing numbers here because if, let's say in the future, I want to remove more than 1, I can do that with these conditions. And instead of setting remove energy equal to 1, I can then set it equal to 2, and it will do this as long as until remove energy is back to 0. It's going to check that the left mouse button has been released, and if a temp value exists and it's an energy card, we're going to send that to the discard pile. And then we're going to adjust our pile to remove that one card. And then we're going to decrement the pile count because we removed a card. We're going to decrement remove energy so that it can work its way back to 0. And then if remove energy equals 0, we're going to change that player field select variable equal to 0 so it stops printing the card in the center of the field. And then it's going to set our tokens array to 0 so that the token array will have to be reinitialized with the new pile. Before we test this, we want to make sure that the player can't do anything during this time when he has to remove the card from the pile. So what I mean by that is we don't want the player to be able to play another trainer card or set a field to, or set a card to the field. So we want to go to our card object, and in the left released event, we want to add a new condition. And the condition we want to create is if player field select is greater than 0, return. And the next thing I want to do is create a new script called script pause. And what this will do is it will prevent the cards from doing anything. And the cards that, and the conditions that are not in that script will allow the cards to maintain their motion. So you'll see what I mean once I implement it all. So we're going to create the script, call it SCR pause, and in that script we're going to add all of the alarm conditions. So what this is going to do is condense those conditions so that I can copy this over, but I will take all of this here and add it to my deck so that the player will not be able to draw a card. So now that I have them all condensed in a pause script, I can now change all of their pause conditions at one time. So I want to actually return 1 for all of these conditions. So now that we have that, now we can test the game. So if I set Squirtle down and I add some energy to him and I use Super Potion, I should not be allowed to set a card onto the field, nor should I be able to use another trainer card. So now let's remove one of these cards. As you can see, the double colorless energy has now been removed from Squirtle's pile. So that's all of the assist trainer cards we will be coding. Now let's go to our regular trainer card script. So the first regular trainer card we are going to program is Pokemon Breeder, and this one's going to be somewhat simple. We're going to create a breeder switch in our player object, and then we're going to remove the card from our hand. So all this trainer card's going to do is set the breeder card variable, the breeder switch variable, to 1. And then when it comes to our card object, when we want to evolve a Pokemon, it's now going to consider whether or not that switch has been enabled. So what we're going to do here is, this is the condition that tests if it can evolve. We're going to actually replace this with a script call called script can't evolve. And we're going to pass it the field position. So let's create this script. In this script, we're going to pass it one position variable at argument 0. We're going to create a temp variable that will store whatever Pokemon it can evolve into. And then the first condition in here is it's going to see if the card you're trying to set on it is the next evolution stage. Now, if the breeder switch is enabled, then it's going to check if the card that you're trying to evolve it into is the evolution of the next evolution card. And if it is, it's going to return 1, and it's going to deassert that breeder switch. So now that we have that, we can go back to our card object and see that the can evolve script is now colored in orange. So let's test that. So if we set Squirtle down and we draw until we find a Blastoise, we can see that I'm not able to evolve Squirtle into Blastoise. But if I use this Pokemon Breeder card, I should now be able to evolve him, which I am. So as you can see, I've evolved Squirtle into Blastoise without Wartortle first. So now let's make sure that the Pokemon Breeder switch deasserted. So I'm going to set Poliwag down and try to evolve him into Poliwrath. As you can see, I cannot. I have to evolve him into Poliwhirl before Poliwrath. So the next trainer card we are going to code is Computer Search. What this does is it prompts the player to discard 2 cards, and then it allows the player to select a card from the deck. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new variable calling it discard phase, and we're going to set that equal to 2. So we set it equal to 2 because the player has to discard 2 cards. Now down the line, if there's another card that prompts the player to discard 1 or more than 2 cards, we can just use the same code for this. And all we'd have to do is change the discard phase number to whatever number needed. And then we're going to reuse that field select variable, and we're going to set it to card number. We're then going to remove the card from our hand, and then the rest of the code is going to be in our card object. So in our card object step event, in the mouse check button released condition, we're going to add, if it's selected, and then we're going to create a new condition for when the player needs to discard a card. Now, what this code is doing is if the discard phase is greater than 0, it's going to check to see if the cursor is over the discard pile. And if it is, we're going to set the card we have over the discard pile, we're going to send that card to the discard pile. We're then going to remove it from our hand. We're going to reduce the discard phase so that the player can do it once more. And then we're going to destroy the object. Now, whenever the discard phase returns to 0, we're then going to set the deck card select variable equal to 1, which is a new variable we've created. And this is only going to happen if the field select variable is computer search. So let's put that here. And then we're going to set the field select variable back to 0. So let's create this script. So what this script is going to do is check to see that our mouse values are within our discard values, or our discard position values. And if it is, it's going to return 1. So now that we have that, in our maintain motion pause conditions, we're going to say if player discard phase is greater than 0, return, so that the player cannot do anything else. And then we're also going to add this to our deck object. So now that we have that coded, we're setting this new variable, deck card select, equal to 1. So what that's going to do is allow the player to select a card from the deck. So we need to go to our deck object. So in our object deck draw event, in this face up condition, which allows the deck to be printed regularly, we're going to add another condition that says if the deck object is not, or if the deck card select variable is not greater than 0, print the deck regularly. And if it is, print the deck outward so the player can see what's in his deck. And then in the step event, we're going to add a new condition, and if the player has double clicked these two conditions right here, check for a double click, and this is the same one we created in our INI file and deck creator video. It's going to store a card selected variable, which is the card in the deck, and if that card is in between 0 and the amount of cards in the deck, we are going to set a temp variable equal to the deck value at that selected position. We are going to set the position in the deck equal to the first position in the deck, and then we're going to set the first position in the deck equal to the position at which we selected. So it's pretty much just swapping the two positions of those cards. Then it's going to draw the card and then decrement the deck card select variable. It's going to set the deck view back to the original state, and then it's going to shuffle the deck. Now, since we're using this alarm 0, we need to add an alarm 0 to our deck object. We don't need to put anything in it, we just need to make sure it exists. And one more thing we want to do is in this face up condition, This allows us to sift through our deck. We need to make sure that the player can do that if the deck card select variable is greater than 0. And then we want to make sure that the player can't do anything if this value is greater than 0. So if player deck card select is greater than 0, return 1. So now let's test that. So let's draw until we get computer search, which is right here. We're going to use it. As you can see, we can see the silhouette of it, which means the game is waiting for us to discard 2 cards. And I shouldn't be able to set a card anywhere or play another trainer card. So I need to set 2 cards to my discard pile. The way we've coded it is I need to take whatever card I'm trying to discard and set it over the discard pile. And if it does, it then adds it to the discard pile, as you can tell. And then once that happens, the deck view is now asserted. So I can now sift through the deck. And then if I double click a card, let's say I want Blastoise, if I double click, I then draw Blastoise. And now the deck should be shuffled. As you can see, it's in a different state than it was. So I can now play Squirtle, play Pokemon Breeder, and then evolve Squirtle. So now the last card I want to code into this game is going to be Pokemon Trader. This will be the most difficult one to do, and maybe the most difficult one to grasp. So if you have any problems understanding any of these, be sure to leave it in a comment below and I will be sure to get back to you. So for Pokemon Trader, we're going to set a temp value to equal 0 because Pokemon Trader can only be used by trading one Pokemon for another Pokemon. So what we're going to do is we're going to sift through all the cards in our hand and count all of the ones that are a Pokemon card. Now if that temp value is greater than 0, we can trade the card. We're going to set that equal to true. We're going to set our field select value to equal to Pokemon Trader, and then we're going to remove this card from our hand. Now, this part is simple, but everything else we need to do is not. So the next thing we want to do is in our card object, in the step event, in the mouse check button released condition, we want to add another condition that checks to see if the card trade value is true, if the card object is in the center of the field, and if it's a Pokemon, then the game knows we have chose this card to be the card we are trading. We are going to set the variable card in hand equal to false, and we're doing that because if it's in the hand, it's going to reset its X position to equal the position in our hand. But we're actually going to change that to be so that the card can be printed in the center of the field. So we're going to change its X and Y position, and then we're going to set our deck card select variable equal to 1. We're going to set the player to temp 2 variable equal to hand position, and you'll see why soon. And then we want to pause the game so that the player can't do anything. So what we want to add into this event to keep the card being printed at this X and Y position is we want to create an else statement for if the card in hand value is not true. And all that's going to do is keep this part of that code and not readjust its X position. So, and then now that we have this pause, we want to add that to our pause script. So if player pause is true, return 1. And then in our maintain motion pause conditions, we want to put if player deck card select is greater than 0, return. So now we want to go to our deck object, because this is where we're going to now select the card from our deck. So what we had before is here. So we're going to want to tailor this for the Pokemon trainer card. And what we're going to do is we're going to create 2 conditions. And the first one is going to be if card trade is true and the card that we are selecting is not a Pokemon, return. So that will force the player to choose a Pokemon card instead of a trainer or energy card. And then what we want to do is we don't want to draw it regularly. We want to create a new draw script, because when we draw this card, we're also going to want this card to go into the center of the field. Because what the player has to do when they play this card is show both cards to the player. So if card trade is true, we're going to set card trade equal to false, and then we're going to draw in a trade fashion, and then else we're going to do a regular draw. So let's create this script here. That's SCR, not DCR. So what we're going to do in this script is we're going to copy over what is in our draw script. So if I open up our draw script, we can see that they are almost identical, with the exception that we're not going to set the card drawn value to be true. We're going to force the X and Y positions to be in the center of the field, and then we're going to force the card sprite to be the card sprite of the card number. So again, we're going to add the card from the top of the deck to our hand. We're going to create the hand card object. We're going to give it the next position in our hand. We're going to set its card number to be that card number for the card in our hand. We're going to force the X and Y positions to be in the center of the field, and we immediately want the sprite of the object to be the sprite of the card. Now once that's done, we want to switch the card we've selected to trade for the card that we selected from our deck, and then we're going to want to put the card from our deck in our hand and then the card from our hand back in our deck. So we're going to use alarm 4 to do this, and we're going to set alarm 4 equal to 50. So that is going to be in our card object. We're going to add event. I'm going to add alarm 4. And in that alarm 4, we're going to initialize 3 temp variables. Now, with the card that's in our hand, we're going to set the temp 2 value equal to its hand position. Then we're going to set its hand position equal to the temp 1 value, because we are switching the card that we've drawn with the card in our hand. And then we're going to swap their X positions so that they move over each other. You'll see when we test it out. And then for the card that's in that came from our deck, we're going to make its hand position equal to the hand position of the card we selected from our hand. And then we're going to swap its X position. And then the next thing we have to do is swap the hand card designators, because the card from our hand, let's say, is the second position of our hand cards, and then the card we draw from our deck is the last card in our hand. So we want to swap those. And that's what this does, similar to what we did when we drew a card from the deck. And then once that's done, we want to send the card from our deck to our hand, and then the card from our hand to our deck. So we're going to set the card that we took from the deck, we're going to set the card in hand value equal to true, so that it returns back to its proper hand position. And then we're going to change the Y position to be the Y position of where the cards in our hand belong. And then with the card that we've taken from our hand, we are going to send that back to our deck. So we're going to make its X position and its Y position equal the deck X and deck Y positions. And then once this is all over, we're going to set our field select variable back to 0. Now, when the card reaches the deck, we want it to be added back into our deck and then the deck to be shuffled. So we're going to use alarm 3 to do that. And in alarm 3, we're going to move the card to the deck. And once it reaches the deck, we're going to remove it from our hand, we're going to add it to our deck, we're going to shuffle our deck, and then we're going to unpause the game and destroy the card. And we're going to recall this alarm until that is done. So, if we've done this correctly, this is what it will look like. So instead of trading Squirtle with Pokemon Trader here, I'm going to find a different one. So I'm going to trade Wartortle. So I'm going to use Pokemon Trader. And this isn't working because we didn't add the Pokemon Trader condition to our trainer script. So let's add that. What we did do is we added it to our assist trainer script instead of our trainer script. So now that we have that in its proper spot, we should now be able to test it. So I'm going to draw cards until I get a Pokemon card, Wartortle. So now let's use Pokemon Trader. As you can see, it's been triggered. I'm going to trade Wartortle. As you can see, it's now in the center of the field. And then I'm able to select a card from my deck. I want this Blastoise card, so I'm going to double select it, or double click it. And that's now in the center. And now as you can see, they swapped places. So now I should be able to use Squirtle, Pokemon Breeder, and Blastoise without there being a problem. So let's do that one more time. And one thing I want to test is when I use Pokemon Breeder, as it's moving to the discard pile, I want to see if I play another card, if it messes up the formation of my hand. So let's get a Pokemon card. So let's trade a Blastoise for a Blastoise. So I'm going to trade, let's do this Squirtle for a Blastoise. Going to double select that. And I shouldn't be able to play any card. As you can see, I couldn't set Squirtle down. But now if I use Pokemon Breeder and I try to set Blastoise down too quickly, let's see if that messes up something. Okay, nothing seemed to mess up. or I just didn't do it fast enough. But anyways, if you have this completed and you want to try to test this game to see if you can, quote, break the game, please do so and let me know what you find out. But this is all I wanted to cover in this video. As you can tell, in this video I didn't type out all of the code. I just pasted it in there just so I can fit more in without taking as much time. Now, if you prefer shorter videos not going into as much detail, let me know in the comments below. If you like this better, also let me know. In the next video, we'll be doing more of these trainer cards, so if you're interested in that, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Again, if you want to be able to download these files and support this series, be sure to check out my Patreon linked in the description below. And if there's anything specific you want to see in these videos, also leave that in the comments. Until next time.